right, it is episode 2 of The Institute. My name is Elijah Winfrey, and joining me today is a special guest who is near and dear to my heart. I got a chance to meet this gentleman last football season at the Syracuse game. He wore number 10 for Georgia Tech, and actually on game days, you might still see him wearing number 10 if he brings his jersey. It is Synjyn Days, running back Synjyn Days, joining me on The Institute podcast. Synjyn, how's it going, man?
I'm good, man. I appreciate you inviting me on here, and definitely glad to chat with you again. I know we chatted a little bit, obviously, when you came down from New York to the Syracuse game, and glad to see you're doing well, and hopefully it warms up a little bit for you.
Yeah, me and Synjyn were talking about it prior to the interview tonight. That here in Messina, New York, it was 15 degrees with 15-mile-per-hour winds, so it really feels like 1 degree. But obviously a little bit warmer down there in Atlanta. So I hope everybody down there in Atlanta is enjoying the weather that you have, But Synjyn, as far as, me meeting you, I kind of want to start right there before we get to your high school career, because obviously, I got the opportunity to meet you at the Syracuse game last season. But when I found out that I would have that opportunity to meet you, I was actually sitting in the Baltimore airport because I had turned my phone off and everything for the flight from Syracuse to Baltimore. And when I turned my phone back on, I had a whole bunch of messages from a whole bunch of people, but I had 2 former Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets who tweeted at me, obviously you being one of them, saying, hey, when you get to Bobby Dodd, let me know where you are, and, we'll meet up. And then the other was Reggie Ball. So I was in the Baltimore airport freaking out because I'm a massive Tech fan. And everybody around me in the Baltimore airport has like no clue as to why I'm so excited. But I just want to say thank you for reaching out, and thank you for making that happen on game day, because you and I met up right as the band was leading the players, through Yellow Jacket Alley, which was crazy. But I appreciate it.
No, it's no problem at all. And, shout out to Reggie. Reggie's a great guy, mentor, doing his thing in the fitness industry. And, he's the definition of a techman through and through. So I'm not surprised that he reached out, and, his pedigree is a little bit higher than mine, in my opinion. Tech legend for sure.
And of course, we're going to talk about your pedigree, because when you got the opportunity, you made the most of it, my friend. But we got to go back to where it all started. And that would be in Orlando, Florida, actually, because that's where you were born. So tell me a little bit about going from Orlando to Atlanta, and what that process was like for, young Synjyn Days.
Yeah, so when I was in Orlando, I was living with my mom, and then at the time ended up moving with my dad here in Atlanta around 5 years old. I guess I was a little spoiled just being a mama's boy at first, and then dad definitely toughened me up a little bit. I couldn't cry my way out of things. So did that. Dad, personality just like me, smile, hug you, might jump on your back if he sees you, if he knows you, or if he doesn't know you. He's a loving person, but definitely somebody that was raised me right as well. He's Christian man. Man of faith, and definitely did the right things to help raise me, be the man I am now. So that's kind of how I got from Orlando to Atlanta now.
And Synjyn, I remember reading somewhere in preparation for the interview that I think it was your father who was a part of MARTA, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yep, he still works there to this day, and me and my wife, we take MARTA for every home game. So I joke with them every time we take it, say, hey, I'm helping contribute to your pension. He enjoys it there. The flexibility, he's been there definitely about 15 years. So funny story with that. So when I was in high school, going through the whole recruiting process, during, I guess, the '08, kind of debacle when, a lot of people got laid off and everything like that. My dad got laid off at previous employer. Everybody got laid off. And the day he got the offer letter for MARTA is the day I got my first football offer, full ride scholarship to Oklahoma State. So that is a day that was very memorable to the Days family. Not many people know that. I don't mention that story a lot, but I figured you bringing up the martyr situation was a great opportunity.
For sure, man. And I know that you are very big in your faith, and so am I. And I'm somebody who believes that, everything happens for a reason. Like I'm a
Correct.
firm believer in that. And I feel like in that situation, it would be really easy to be like, oh man, this whole situation sucks, and get really down. But instead, hey, here's this other door that opens. One door closes, another one opens type situation. So that's cool. I
Yeah,
appreciate you sharing that with me.
that's
Um,
no problem at all.
Synjyn, as far as your high school career, you and I were kind of joking around about this prior to the interview that like it's hard to find footage of Synjyn days playing high school football because for whatever reason, the camera wasn't there. But I'm going to choose to say you were too fast and too great to catch on film. So there we go. But but as far as high school stats are concerned, so that people kind of understand the type of football player you were in high school playing quarterback at Hillgrove High School in Powder Springs, Georgia, you rushed for 75 touchdowns and threw for 30 more in your high school career. I'm just curious, as a quarterback, who were the people that you looked up to as far as how you wanted to kind of, get your style after, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I'll say the main person I looked up to just because of the way he played, um, his faith and the tenacity that he had was Tim Tebow. He was a bigger quarterback, ran the ball hard, not the fastest guy on the field, but if you tried to tackle him, you were going to feel it, for 4 quarters. So that was, I would say, that was the style that I played in at quarterback. So we ran the triple option. So easy way, recruiting wise, to Georgia Tech through the quarterback position, but Tim Tebow was definitely the person I looked up to the most with just the way he played the game, the way he carried himself. That was the person I cared about for sure.
And were there any others that you looked at maybe in the pros?
So being in Atlanta, being a black male, especially in Atlanta, playing the quarterback position, Mike Vick, that was, unfortunately didn't have his speed, 4.2, 40. But the way he played the game, just quick decision making, I had a rocket of an arm. I had a pretty strong arm. I think I still do. Not still now. I haven't thrown a football in probably a couple months, but when I go back out there at Tech, I throw it around a little bit, 40, 50-yard balls. So I would say Mike Vick was somebody very influential to my game as well.
Now, Synjyn, at Hillgrove High School, obviously you had a lot of touchdowns there, over 100, as I just read earlier. I'm not a math guy. I know you are, but 75 plus 30, that's a lot of touchdowns. That's a lot of success. Were there any big games from your high school career that you can kind of cue us in on that maybe you still think about, or any moments from your high school team that you still think about to this day?
Oh goodness, that's a good question. So still close with a lot of my high school friends and get together every once in a while. We come over, might come over to my place or go over theirs or go out or do something, and we just reminisce about like practice and some big games. And so a lot of my friends joke around with me because I played quarterback. So and some of them were receivers. And I said, you never would throw the ball. I would be open and you wouldn't throw the ball. You run for 60, 70 yards, but I was wide open. You could have made it a whole lot easier. So they always give me a hard time for that. But it's one of those things where you laugh about it now, which I'm sure they probably were open, but during the time I wasn't really looking at that. But I would say the biggest game I would say that stands out to me is we played Dalton High School. Shout out to Dalton, carpet capital of the world. And I remember this is when first, like, I guess before kind of Twitter came out, they had like these message boards on scout.com. I'm not sure if anybody remembers that. And my parents had an account, but like not under their name. So people wouldn't know like we're reading or whatnot. And I'm reading the board. They're like, yeah, we're going to stop Synjyn Days. He's not going to, have more than 50 rushing yards, this and that. And I printed it out and put it in my locker that week. And it was our first time ever making it to the playoffs because the Hillgrove High School opened up in 2006. And that's when I entered high school. So it was brand new school. We shouldn't have been in that position, but we were a pretty good team. A lot of NFL guys from there now that are in the league. But ended up rushing for I think 300 plus rushing yards and 5 touchdowns that game, and we won. That's the biggest thing, we won. But being able to kind of shut those people up was something that was pretty astounding to me, and that was my best high school game I ever had rushing wise. So doing that and leading the team to the victory, first playoff win in school history was amazing.
Now, Synjyn, I want to go back to two things that you said, my friend. Number one, you said that the wide receiver was saying, "I'm open, but you never threw it to me," and that immediately made me think of the Disney movie with The Rock in it called Game Plan. I don't know if you've ever seen that or not.
Yeah.
So kind of something similar. But the other thing I was going to mention is that you talked about how Hillgrove was a new school, a new school that you were going into, and. Yep. I don't want to take the focus off of your career, but I do just want to share this one story because I didn't realize you and I would have this in common. But I remember when I was living in Tyrone, Georgia, at one point I was a Tyrone Tornado. That was the elementary school there. That we were the Tyrone Tornadoes. We were very proud about that. And I remember being called into the library. And what was put in front of us was on a sheet of paper, it was 3 different names of animals. I can't remember the third name, but the other 2 were cardinals and crocodiles. And so I voted for crocodiles because I was a big, Steve Irwin fan, being a 90s kid. And I didn't know what we were doing. I just thought, they're just asking us what our favorite animal out of these 3 is. And then come to find out, they were having us pick the mascot for the school that all of us kids were getting shipped to. So we go to Cleveland Elementary School, and to this day, they are called the Crocodiles. So I was just curious, what was that situation like for you? Did you know that you were going to a brand new school? Were you excited about that, or how did that work?
Yeah, so I went to Marietta Middle School. So I was, I guess, kind of slotted, getting ready to go to Marietta High School, which is very prominent, historical background. Within Cobb County. Obviously, you're a kid, you don't really have a lot of decisions. You're not making any decisions at all. So my parents, they prayed, they got together and, met with, rest in peace to Coach Friday. He was a phenomenal coach at Marietta High School. Met with him and then met with Philip Ironside, who was my coach at Hillgrove, and kind of just spoke about dynamics, kind of what they want, from a head coach, perspective, because it was a brand new school. So kind of had choices of different high schools I could attend, and, ended up deciding Hillgrove High School. Unfortunately, I was not in the naming process of Hillgrove Hawks. That's our mascot. But one of the names that I heard was rumored. I don't know if it's true or not. It's just one of those myths that probably go on, but we possibly could have been called the Hillgrove Hurricanes, which would have been cool as well. So that's kind of how we got decided with Hillgrove High School.
Very, very cool. Very cool. Synjyn, as far as your recruitment process to Georgia Tech, what was that like, and what were the other schools that were kind of in contention for your services at quarterback?
Yeah, so it was pretty new, obviously, to me. Never went through the recruiting process before, and nobody at the high school ever went through it because it's a brand new school. So a lot of the coaches, the staff, they didn't really know how to do recruiting, so to speak. So my dad, he would record camcorder things, all the games and things like that, and edit it himself and then send it out to the different schools to try to get recruited. So that's kind of how my recruiting process honestly got started, is Pops holding the camcorder and recording and sending it out, then obviously getting interest from, I mean, we're at UGA, Florida. Never got an offer from Florida. Forgot what was the coach's name that came out. He was a DB coach there, but they came, and my dad knew growing up that was my dream school was University of Florida. So born in Orlando, so obviously a Gator fan and Tim Tebow, So that was my dream school. My dad knew if they offered immediately, committing right there, and everything else is done. But God had another plan. So I never got off from University of Florida, and a lot of the schools, once the recruiting started to heat up, going through the whole recruiting process with the different like rivals.com and doing the different interviews and things like that. My big thing is I wanted to play offense, and a lot of the schools that were recruiting me wanted me for defense. So I played quarterback and a little bit of defensive back as well. But every time I was on defense, it was like a situational thing. It was usually like third and long, it's fourth quarter, it's a close game. But every time I was in, I'm either like getting an interception, making a big tackle, a sack, causing a fumble. So it's like, all right, clearly this kid, has a knack for the ball. And that's just instinct, of doing different things. So I guess a lot of the coaches, that was recruiting me wanted me to play defense. And, I would be obviously respectful, say, I respect you, thank you for thinking of me, but I want to play offense. And I was upfront and honest with them, said, I don't want you to waste your scholarship if you don't want me to play offense. So that caused a lot of schools not to give me the official offer. But I remember Oklahoma State, that was my very first offer that we talked about earlier. Loved Oklahoma State, went out there on an official visit. That was a fun time. But that was probably the only school I would have considered not playing offense for. And I said the coach that was recruiting me, he went to Merida High School as well. So easy, close ties right there. And, I told him, I said, I respect you guys, offer me for safety. But if you guys just give me a shot on offense, I will commit to the school. But if you don't see me actually in that role and you want to move me, that's fine. I will still, come and respect that decision. They said, no, Synjyn, we're not gonna lie to you. We want you to play defense, so we're not gonna say, okay, we'll let you play offense, quote unquote, to try to get me there. So I respect them a whole lot for being upfront and honest with that. So it was really between Oklahoma State and Georgia Tech, and so Brian Bohannon was my recruiting coordinator and also my quarterback coach at Tech. He's the head coach now at Kennesaw State. He's doing a phenomenal job there. And one of the main things that really attracted me, to Georgia Tech, one, obviously, it's in Atlanta. It's right in the background. Parents able to come to every home game easily, friends able to come to the games easily. Unfortunately, then we didn't have NIL, so I couldn't get any type of deals.
Right.
But and then Coach Johnson, very stand-up guy, shoot you straight. He would get on to you, but he would shoot you exactly straight and tell you exactly how it was. That's something that I loved and respected about him. And him and Coach Bohannon, man of faith, something that held strong with me and my family as well. And then another thing that helped recruit me to Tech was Derek Moore. He was our team chaplain. Literally, if you just looked at him and my dad, like if they were just fate turned like opposites where you couldn't see their face, identical. And black guys, bald head, just enjoying life. And I was like, yeah, that is definitely a sign right there. Got along good with him. A lot of, great conversations with him. And then obviously the educational piece at Georgia Tech, things that, going to last a lifetime, not just 4 years, for 40 years. So those are really my recruiting process. It's been a while since I've had to actually, kind of think and talk about it, but that was kind of my recruiting process, how I went through some of the main things that attracted me to Georgia Tech. and happy with my decision. Wouldn't have wanted it, another way.
So, Synjyn, before we take a brief commercial break, I want to talk just because I know you're very big on, athletes nowadays being able to gain something from your experience, being able to maybe troubleshoot a little bit because I've read that
Mm.
about you. So, when it comes to the recruiting process, I understand it's a little bit of a different monster nowadays with
Yep.
NIL, transfer portal, all that type of stuff. But my question is, when it comes to an offer versus them chatting you up, what is kind of the difference there? Because I know a lot of high school kids get excited when a college is talking to them, but I know it's like a completely different animal when it comes to they're actually committed enough to you to give you an offer and like how kids are supposed to navigate that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So when you're just talking to colleges, that's great. It's phenomenal. It's a blessing. But to get the actual scholarship, that's really where they're putting, the money where their mouth is at the end of the day. Because if they offer you, okay, we're planning on paying for your schooling. We want you to come play with us. That's where, it's essentially six figures that they're offering. If you think of room and board, tuition, all those different, things like that, that's really where it starts to, hit you a little totally different, to be completely honest. I would get letters from Florida State to go down to their camp, other big name schools, but they never offered. I think it was really because I told them I wanted to play offense, to be completely honest. So I go to the camps, get MVPs at the camps, but like I said, God is in control, and He had a different scenario that He wanted for me and for my life. So I think, yeah, I mean, once you get the actual offer, that's when they are 100% serious with you.
And Synjyn, one thing that I also wanted to ask here before we went to break, in regards to recruiting for any high schooler that might end up watching this video at some point, you
Mm.
did something that I think takes a lot of guts to do. That is, you had the offer in your hands and you said, I know what I want to do. I know I want to play offense. What advice would you give to kids that maybe are getting an offer for a position or a system that maybe they don't necessarily see themselves in, but they're scared to say no because there might not be another offer if you say no. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. I just really had confidence in myself, to be completely honest, and confidence in having those discussions with my parents, because nowadays everything is, recorded and blown up. And so you never want to put anything on record that you haven't had, at least a thought process behind it, and have to essentially go back on your word. And so talk with my dad and, my dad and my mom about like what I wanted. It was what I wanted and what they thought was best for me at the end of the day. And my dad we talked, was like, you realize you probably have a less of a chance to make it to the NFL playing the triple option at quarterback than you do playing defensive back at a big name school. So yeah, that's fine. I mean, and obviously you want to make it to the NFL. That's, phenomenal. Every kid that plays football, dreams of, the last 2 minutes of a Super Bowl, making a catch, or, running the ball or anything like, things like that. And I was fine with kind of dream up. So it wasn't the end all be all for me with making it to, the NFL. So I think when kids are going through that process, is getting with the people that care about you the most and having those conversations, because they know they're going to do what's best for you. At the end of the day, they have no ties to that school or that institute. You really have to figure out what you want for yourself and what you want for your future self as well. So those are some of the things I think kids need to think about before they make that decision on, hey, whether I want to go to this school and play a position I've never played before and I don't want to play just because, they offered a scholarship. I think you sit down, you pray about it, have a conversation with your loved ones, and you figure it out that way. Everybody's situation is going to be a little bit different, though.
All right. And folks, that is Synjyn Days. We're going to have more coming up with Synjyn after the break, so I hope you'll stick around. This is the Institute Podcast. This is the Institute Podcast. My name's Elijah Winfrey. Joining me tonight, our special guest, number 10, Synjyn Days. That's right, he had a really awesome season in 2014. I promise you, we're going to get there. We're going to get to, him tight roping the sideline in the Orange Bowl. We're going to get to all of that, folks. But first, we got to start off with the other 3 years at Georgia Tech. And Synjyn, I know that for you, you came to Georgia Tech as a quarterback. Whenever you got there as a quarterback, I know you also had some position changes that came up. But first, at the quarterback position, what was that like running the triple option offense from somebody who was basically there at the offense's beginning in Paul Johnson?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, but very demanding. As you could imagine, the quarterback position, having to know exactly what everybody is doing on every single play and every single check, and knowing your reads and actually making the right reads as well. So it was a lot that, looking back on it now, I was not ready, for it. But it's one of those things where I learned a lot, and I think me playing the quarterback position helped me out throughout the other positions that I played on offense. So obviously played quarterback, A back, B back, and a lot of teammates would joke and just call me the C back since I've played, everything, in the backfield. So it was a great experience. There was some good conversations with Coach Johnson, some that I probably can't say on air, and with Ryan Bohannon as well. But it's one of those things where you live and you learn.
Now, Synjyn, I like to believe that the folks that watch this show have a high football IQ. So when it comes to your pre-snap recognition, post-snap confirmation as a quarterback, what was it like in the Paul Johnson triple option offense? Because I know that's a different thing than it is when you're in shotgun and you can kind of see everything because you're right up under center. So can you kind of take us through what you were being, if you can remember, what you were being asked to do as you walked up to the line of scrimmage before the play started?
Yeah, first you would, as you're getting up to the line of scrimmage, you got to recognize the defense that they're in. then you have to figure out, okay, is the play call that we called, which obviously most likely was a run play, can it be ran? Can it be ran due to the scheme that they're in? And if it's not, then you got to be able to check into another play that will work for that scheme as well. And then once you do that, you have to figure out, okay, who's the dive key, then who's the pitch key. Okay, what's the leverage on the safety? Is he too far up? Because then that might make the block harder for the receiver, might be having to crack down on him, or that might be for the A-back to go arc and block them. So during that, and essentially through those whole 4 or 5 seconds, your mind is running constantly, with that, and then be able to, all right, make a check, make the right decision, and then next play, same thing, same process, all over again. So your mind's constantly working, in the triple option. I think nowadays, the offensive schemes, the quarterbacks, I don't think, obviously they have to think. Don't let me say that's you have to do that, but I feel like a lot of the traditional offenses, you can kind of get away with just running the play, depending on the play call, honestly. But the triple option, it was totally different. So that's from what I remember. It's been a while since I've had to think about that.
And I will say, just to kind of back up Synjyn a little bit here, and Synjyn, you tell me if this is not what you meant, but I know that in some offenses, it is purely progressional. Like, they're not necessarily asking you to read anything on the defensive side. It's just okay, if this is here, you do this. If this is here, you do this. And then there's some offenses where, as you get experience, they will tell the quarterback, all right, you got a little more leeway. If you see something, you can change it. Is that kind of what you meant?
Yep, that's correct. That's correct. Because there were some plays in the triple option where it really didn't matter if the defense was lined up in whatever they were lined up in. You could run the play, especially if it was like a designated give to the D-back or whatnot. But if it became an actual option style of play, okay, you have to figure out what type of technique the read key would be in. Like if it was a traditional like triple option, if the read key is all the way out at a 9 technique, you might check to something different, or you might know, okay, I know it's going to probably be a give because the defensive end would take too long to crash down. So just those little nuances of the game that you would pick up on. And obviously Coach Johnson would help us scheme to figure out, all right, what does the read key normally do in this position if we've played them before? So, yep.
So, Synjyn, I got to ask you, and I know I'm throwing a lot of quarterback questions at you, but I feel like you might enjoy this because it's a little different than maybe some of the other questions you usually get. But when you're under center, how are you able to see what technique that defender is in? Because I'm thinking about it in my head, and I'm going, okay, at eye level, what do you have? You've got a defender in your face, you got your center in front of you, and it's like, how are you supposed to see that within those 4 seconds where you're solving that equation?
Yeah, so when you're coming up to the line, the offensive line is usually supposed to make calls for you, but sometimes they will make the wrong call sometime. But you have to go based off of what the offensive line is calling, because if you're seeing that let's say the defensive tackle is at a 3 technique and he's really more like a 2, but if the guard calls him a 3, then you have to kind of go based off of that. And then if the play honestly gets like blown up or whatnot, then you're able to, not necessarily blame it on the offensive line, but it's like, hey, no, that's not what we're going to call it. So obviously we have meetings and everything beforehand to try to figure all that out as much as possible. So it's really based on the offensive line's call, but you're able to see a lot with your eyes as well.
Okay, so now the next time folks are watching football and you hear that, that pre-snap audio, you know what's going on. Like you understand how that's being helpful to the quarterback, or in some cases, maybe not being so helpful, but they'll work it out.
Yeah, just trying to get on the same page with the offensive line. That's the biggest key.
As far as checking the play, because you mentioned that, I don't know Paul Johnson, obviously. I've never met the man. I never played for the man. But I got to imagine that if you're going to check out of the play that he called, you better make sure that gets some yardage, right?
Oh yeah, big time. I mean, there would be times where somebody would check out a play. I mean, including myself when I was at quarterback during the scrimmages and practices, and like why are you checking out of that if it's not the right call? And so you try to explain why you thought it was. Then he gives his advice on the matter, and most of the time he's right. So it's one of those things where you got to be in the game to be able to learn from your mistakes and things like that, and hopefully you don't make the same mistake twice.
For sure. And I will say one of the things that always impressed me about Coach Johnson was how he had, because I did end up coaching for a year in like semi-professional football, but I always had a play call sheet. And it seemed like he never had a play call sheet. It was all in his head, and he could make
Yeah.
adjustments on the fly. And I always admired that about him. And I guess when you're doing it for so long and doing it at a high level, it's kind of easy to do that, right, Synjyn?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that, and it's honestly crazy that obviously you see coaches now where they have like the whole play sheet. It looks like a Waffle House menu that they're carrying around. But Coach Johnson, he knew his offense ins and outs, and his staff as well. So the people that are in the box, they were to help him out as well, and obviously they coach for so long together to where their minds are kind of starting to think the same. And even like to us players, I know once I graduated, and going back when Coach Johnson was playing while we're watching the actual games, of like, okay, this is the play that he's about to call. This is the side it's gonna go. And lo and behold, it does that. And so I guess it's being in the system, being around him, your mind starts to, think a lot like him as well.
Synjyn, I know one of the early stories from your Georgia Tech career was actually the kindness that you showed to somebody else. It was a former football team manager, I do believe, at Hillgrove. His name was Nick Nutt. This story comes to us from 2012. What can you tell us about Nick, his battle, how you knew him, and how that story affected you?
Yeah, so I knew Nick in high school just kind of by passing. He was a couple years younger than me, so wasn't like best friends with him or anything like that. But the girl that went to our high school, she does ministry work now. She does stuff in like Africa and things like that now. And she reached out to me and said, "Hey, do you remember this guy named Nick? He's battling cancer. He's a huge, Georgia Tech fan. Would love to see if you could come out and, just talk with them, pray with them, whatever you're able to do. If you're able to do it, great. If not, it's fine. I know you're busy." And I'm like, I can do that. I try to help people out as much as I can. Obviously we all have 24 hours in a day, so sometimes you have to say no to some things. But this instance, I was like, yeah, I mean, that's no problem. So went out to see him in the hospital, and just talk with him about life and obviously Georgia Tech football, what he was looking forward to, that season. And I think might have been either a true freshman or a redshirt freshman at the time. And he was excited about Georgia Tech, about Coach Johnson, players we had on the team. So we just talked football, and then we talked about life. And one of the things that stood out to me is obviously people that's battling cancer. It always seems like they're a little bit stronger than most of us. I guess people that aren't going through that. And he would never blame himself for what he's going through. He would just say, I hope my struggle would or will help inspire other people to keep going, to keep fighting, keep doing the things that they need to be doing." And I remember the longest time I had it was a like the little bracelets that people would get. I had that probably most of my college career, and then unfortunately it broke, and I'm not sure where it is now. But just a kid that had his head on straight, and unfortunately, he passed away. Not too far after I actually got to sit down and talk to him in depth about life, and Well, Texas dad from time to time, but just things that stood out to me is just his faith and his willingness to fight, even when it didn't look good for him. To be completely honest, so that was Nick Nut, and I know that I do have some pictures where I have his name on my tape that I would wear, playing the game for him. But essentially, I want to say it was like essentially throughout my whole college career, I would always carry that with me, carry him with me on the field. So he was a big inspiration um, for me.
Synjyn, I don't want to derail us, but I just want to point something out that I think is just so beautiful about the school that you and I both love. Obviously you went there, you played for them. I'm a fan. I've always been a fan. But the thing that I love about Georgia Tech is it's just something about that GT. When you have the ability to put that GT on, it's like you're putting on a superhero cape and you get to go meet somebody in their moment of need. And it just feels like, Georgia Tech is one of those schools that does that a lot. I know they did that for me personally with what I was going through. And
Mm.
I even, I told my wife, whenever that happened, I said, listen, I was already a Georgia Tech fan, but this solidified it for me because of how just how far out they went for me and my family. And I'm just curious if that's something that you feel as well, and if you feel like that is a responsibility that you carry because you wear the GT.
Yeah, I think just not even necessarily just being, Georgia Tech. I think just being a human at the end of the day. I mean, we all go through things, and we're all going through things. So one of the things that I know I try to do as much as possible. I know I could probably do a better job as well. Is when I'm seeing people, just saying hello, asking them how their day is, because somebody could be going through something, and you just saying hello and giving them a smile or giving them a hug or just checking in on them could change their whole outlook on life. I know there's been a couple instances this year already for me personally where I've reached out to people and they were going through a hard time, and they were like, Synjyn, I really do appreciate you reaching out and your attitude. So it's uh it's something I feel like us humans need to do more often, is checking and loving on the people that we care about, honestly.
I certainly agree with that, my friend. As far as, your first 3 years at Georgia Tech, I know a lot of that was going to practice, doing the very best you can in practice, but unfortunately not seeing the field. And obviously that turned into something beautiful for your story, especially in that senior season. But those years prior to your senior season, what were those like for you? And who was around you to kind of keep your head on straight, if you even needed that, to keep pushing forward and not quitting?
Yeah, so the first year it really wasn't that tough for me. The first year when I redshirted, because like everybody pretty much that you came in with got redshirted, so you're all kind of in the same boat. Then the next year, it's redshirt freshman year, so I'm getting a little playing time, but I know I'm the backup essentially to Tevin Washington, and so I'm just doing what I can. My number gets called if we're up by a lot, go in, try to do what I can. So that wasn't really that tough. But then I want to say redshirt sophomore year, that was a little tough for me because that's when they brought in Vadley, and he was supposed to be like the savior to Georgia Tech, so to speak. Love Vad. To this day, he does great, speaking engagements and work in that realm. But it was a little tough for me just because, I'm thinking, all right, Tevin's getting ready to graduate or did, yeah, Tevin's getting ready to graduate. So, okay, it's going to be my turn. But, I guess I got to kind of realize that, they're going to continue through their recruiting process, Georgia Tech wise. And then, so I kind of become third string, and Coach Johnson then comes to me, um, asked me and my family to come in and meet with them, saying they want to switch my position to ABAC. So what I'm thinking, not anything done on hers, but I'm thinking like I'm about to transfer. I'm gone. That's what I'm thinking in my head, to be completely honest. Um, and obviously after we had the conversation with Coach Johnson, sat down, talked to my parents, prayed about it, said, "Hey, just look at this as another opportunity, to do something great." So I'm like, okay, that's fine. Parents were able to kind of, I guess, talk me off the ledge, so to speak, with that. Um, then A-back get a little bit more playing time. Then end up starting my junior year at A-back. Dion Hill, he had some issues that happened to him health wise, and so I ended up starting with Robbie Godhigh. He's also Cobb County guy, went to Harrison High School, and so I'm starting, not really getting the ball a lot or anything like that because it's a triple option. That's one thing the triple option is going to make you do is become very unselfish, big time. And at that point, I'm just happy that I'm playing, and I'm getting excited for clearing the way for Robbie for big runs, and celebrating with him when he gets in the end zone. So I'm having the time of my life. I'm not thinking of, okay, I need to get X amount of carries. If I got two touches a game, I was happy with that. Just happy that the team was winning. I was having fun. I was playing. So I was happy and content with that. Then senior year rolls around. Um, Not really playing a lot at ABAC. Not sure really why. I don't really see what changed between the year before and then. To be completely honest, that's something I will never know. But during that time frame, Coach Johnson again comes to me and says, "Hey, Synjyn, can you do a little B-back as well?" Because at that time, Lasky was the only B-back that was on scholarship,
Right.
that was there, and I'm like, I don't mind doing B-back as well. When Lasky gets tired, I'll go in and do what I can, and still doing A-back, as well, and then doing short yardage, like goal line type quarterback position because we had Justin Thomas and obviously little slighter frame than me. So for the short yarders, they need somebody big, which I was like, I'm fine with either way, whatever position at that point. It's senior year, I'm just want to go out on the field, have fun, and win games at that point, senior year, and um, so that's kind of how the senior year kind of started off for me. And I'm sure we're going to get into more detail regarding once I starting. But first, I want to say, I guess 3.5 years were was challenging for sure. But it's looking back on it now, I guess is delayed gratification is kind of the best way to describe my time at Tech for sure.
And Synjyn, I want to take us back to that moment where Coach first asked you, brought in your family, brought in you, and asked you to go to ABAC. I know that you were a quarterback. That was
Mm-hmm.
your whole thing. I am a quarterback.
Yep.
My question is, had you ever had a favorite running back or any running back that you ever looked at and said, I want to model my game after them? Because we talked about earlier, you were a quarterback, you're looking at quarterbacks. Now all of a sudden they're like, we're going to switch it up on you. Was there anybody that you were, admiring at the running back position that folks maybe would be interested in?
Yeah, so when I first started playing football, generally speaking, my first funny story, my first position ever was left guard, and I was number 20. When it's that pound ball age where the coaches, kids kind of as being put in the key positions or whatever, and my dad wasn't coaching at the time. He's just trying to get me out to be with other kids and things like that. So start playing doing that, then we start doing sprints after practice, and I'm just way ahead of everybody. And then I'm like, okay, how about we give this kid a shot? And then so I started playing running backs. That was my first like real position. And I was number 20. So growing up, my favorite running back was Barry Sanders. Um, Back in the day, runs would be like him running all across the field and then breaking up field and scoring long runs and things like that. So I would say I wouldn't say I modeled my game after him because our style's a little bit different. But that was definitely my favorite running back growing up was Barry Sanders for sure.
And you know what? As a Detroit Lions fan, I got to say this message is approved. That's right.
Hey, the Lions are back. They got our boy Jahmyr Gibbs up there, so
Mhm.
the Lions are back for sure.
It's funny because one of the other podcasts that people will see on this YouTube channel, if they choose to go look at the other stuff on here, I do a Detroit Lions podcast. And I was
Okay.
talking about Jahmyr months before anybody else was. And I said, he is a first round pick. He's going to Detroit. And of course, my name
Yep.
is Elijah, and we both have a biblical background. So, the people on the show now are like, who do you got next? And I'm like, I'm not that good. I'm just,
Yeah.
but, but anyway, as far as running back is concerned, I kind of thought you were going to say like T.J. Duckett or Warren Dunn, or I shouldn't say Warren Dunn, I should say Warwick Dunn
Work
from the
done. Yeah.
Falcons. That's what I thought you were going to say. But Barry, that's never a bad option, my friend.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, definitely. Just during that time frame, that was like the number one running back. So would just watch him, and just fell in love with his game. Honestly, when I was a kid, and obviously once I kind of moved positions, I was always a physical, type of person, especially when it came to football. So the physical part of it was easy. Then once, I obviously moved to quarterback, the physical part was like, all right, what quarterback? That's Tim Tebow, easily.
Synjyn, as far as the running back position is concerned, we kind of talked about it earlier. What is expected of a quarterback? What are you looking at? So when it comes to running back and you have to switch, I know you had played it previously, but just for folks at home who have never been asked to switch from, quarterback to running back, maybe they've been asked in their life to switch from right couch to left couch. Uh, what is that transition like, for folks who don't understand?
Yeah, it's a little bit different, because obviously the triple option was totally different. I never had to. I might have blocked somebody at quarterback because like the play's all the way downfield and like they try to reverse. So like I give the guy like a little shove, but it's the quarterback. You're not expected to make an actual, significant block. But triple option at A back, you are one of the key blockers. You're essentially a glorified lineman. When you weren't getting the ball or in tail motion. And I was a bigger guy. I was like, 230, 240. So blocking was pretty easy, to get a grasp of. But the cut blocking, I didn't really like cut blocking, honestly, out on the edge. Cause I'm like, I'm 230. If I'm not able to move a safety, 5 yards out of the way, then I don't need to be playing Division I football. So I would try to stay up. Unfortunately, Coach Owens would get on me sometimes for that, but I'd be like, Robbie, I made a lane for Robbie, or the other A back to score. So, I guess my techniques work sometimes they didn't. Fortunately, most of the time they did work. But when it came to like running the ball, it was really second nature, honestly, because you're running an open field a lot when you get the ball at A back, and then trying to make a defender miss an open field. But yeah, it was the biggest transition for me was learning how to arc block. There's like a different type of step that you have to take, so you can't go too flat. Then you'll be out of leverage to be able to block the defender. Those were some of the little nuances that I had to learn, and unfortunately, some of it was trial by error. But it is what it is.
Last question for this segment, my friend. Obviously during those first 3 years when you're not really playing that much, but you're doing everything you can in the classroom and obviously on the practice field to show what you can do. What teammates were around you that really, help you stay locked in, that you really were able to form those bonds with?
I would say some of the closest relationships I had on the field with was Zach Lasky, and obviously at the time we weren't really competing for the same position. So it was cool with Zach, Tony Zennin, Charles Perkins. Trying to think. Those are really the main ones I would surround myself with most of the time. And then like having, some of my friends that went to like Morehouse and Georgia State that I grew up with, that I went to high school with, having them come over and I'm just able to like honestly just vent to them about the situation. Of course, they're on my side. Like, Synjyn, man, you need to be in. You know, be starting. The other guy's whack. He's not good. And I'm like, you're right, but I'm like, they don't know. They don't know all the ins and outs of the actual offense and scheme and different things like that. So it was like good to kind of let some steam off. With those relationships as well.
All right. Well, hey, folks, we're going to have more with Synjyn Days coming up after the break, so stick around. This is The Institute. We ended up running 7 of these events. And by the time I turned 25, because this was a personal goal of mine,
right?
By the time I turned 25, my wife and I had organized events that had raised $10,000 for local charities.
Awesome.
And that was important to me. That was important to me because while I was couch surfing, I was keeping receipts of everybody that helped me along the way. The North Country saved me. If it wasn't for the people who were nice enough to let me stay on their floor or stay on their couch, I would not be sitting here talking to you guys today. And that was a big reason why I wanted to raise that money, was because I wanted to give back.
Yeah.
And I knew I was just one person, but I wanted to do what one person could do. This is the Institute Podcast. My name is Elijah Winfrey. Joining me is number 10, Synjyn Days. You should remember him from his days on the flats. And we are talking about all things that have occurred throughout Synjyn's Georgia Tech career. We're also going to talk about what he is doing today. And of course, a lot of Tech fans are saying, what's he doing today? He's at all the Georgia Tech events, which, yes, that is a part of his life, but there's other things too. But let's talk about that senior season, the all-important senior season of 2014. I want to start things off by just putting a stat out there. Now, I don't know if this is ever going to come up at a Georgia Tech trivia night, but it should. Okay, it should. Does anybody know how many yards Synjyn Days had in the first 7 games of his senior season? I do, but it's because it's on the paper in front of me. I did not know this previously. He had 16 attempts for 99 yards and 1 touchdown. That was in the first 7 games of this man's senior season. But then, in the last 7 games, check this out, 141 attempts, 835 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Talk about knowing what to do with your opportunity when you get one. That, to me, is one of the most special parts, about Synjyn's career, is just that example, that example for people of, hey, when you get your opportunity, do something with it. And Synjyn, I just got to ask you, those first 7 games, before we start breaking down those last 7 that you kind of went off in, those first 7 games, how are you feeling? Because I know you were like, look, this is my last chance here, right?
Yeah. So, growing into senior year, that point, I'm wanting to have fun, win some games, make some blocks, maybe score a couple touchdowns. I'm not thinking, statistically, I'm going to have a phenomenal year, to be completely honest with you. So more so, all right, I'm gonna, get some key blocks, might get a couple carries, do what I, need to do. So the first half of the year, that's kind of my mindset of how it was. I was doing A back, B back, and then some short yardage quarterback things as well. So it was all over the field. So was just trying to step in and help out, when my number was called.
Now, Synjyn, I don't want to get the player's name wrong, but I know that there was somebody who got hurt, which was one of the reasons why you got an opportunity to start getting more carries. Who was that? And obviously, I know you're never rooting for a teammate to get hurt. But like, what was your mindset whenever that happened?
Yeah, so it was Zach Lasky. I'm sure all the Tech fans remember Zach. Zach's a great guy. Love that man to death. Our nickname to each other was Ebony and Ivory. And I guess you could guess who was Ebony and who was Ivory with that one. Unfortunately, NIL wasn't a thing back then. We could have sold a ton of shirts, with that, especially the way the year ended up going. But yeah, Lasky, he went down with I don't know if it was a separated shoulder or AC joint, or it was something with his shoulder. And it was before, I think, like the week before the pit game. So I was gonna get my first start at B back, and it was honestly, it was kind of sad because Zach's family is from the Pittsburgh area.
Hmm.
So didn't he didn't travel with the team, but he did fly up with his family, because he had a lot of people already planned on going to the game because that's where his family was from. And I said, in memory of you, not like he passed away or anything like that, but I wore his number 37, like practice, like cut off like shirt under the jersey for that game. And I think I actually continued to wear it throughout that year. I think no, I don't think I did. It sounds too great to be true for me to wear it throughout the rest.
You
But
almost started a legend.
I know for a fact I wore it that game. Just to show love to him and acknowledge him. So that pit game was my first start at V back and my first 100-yard game. So it was memorable for me, and obviously, never want a teammate to go down for me to get shine, but it's one of those things where Coach John said, "Hey, it's your opportunity. We need you." So kind of did the most with my opportunity.
That's for sure, my friend. And I'm going to read that stat line for folks. You'll see the final score on your screen as you're watching here. It was October 25th of 2014 at Pittsburgh, as Synjyn just told you. Synjyn Days had 22 attempts for 110 yards. That, by the way, for the mathematicians out there, that is a 5-yard average. And Georgia Tech ended up winning that game against Pittsburgh 56-28. That is, and that's the thing you'll notice about this 2014 Georgia Tech squad is that, pardon my French, but these weren't just beatings, right? They were whooping that butt, like on a lot of these teams they were playing. Because I was looking back at that and I'm like, I don't remember it being that big of a point spread, but yeah, it was. So again, 56-28, 22 attempts, 110 yards, a 5-yard average. Synjyn, you just told us a lot about that game, but anything that you remember from the game itself, about how you were feeling as you kept getting the ball. Like, I have to imagine it felt a little bit validating in a way that, like, hey, now I got my opportunity, keep feeding me, right?
Yeah, it was. So what I do remember about the game, James Conner was the running back for Pittsburgh. Then actually, we kind of got close after that game. But the first half, I think they had like 4 or 5 consecutive possessions of turnovers to us. So that's kind of how the score kind of got out of hand very fast. I don't know if people go back and look at the actual box score from quarter to quarter. That's how it kind of got out of hand. But I do remember being in, and obviously I'm playing a whole lot more than I'm used to. And so I'm getting tired because it's like, all right, I'm getting hit like every play. I don't want to sub out because I want to stay in. This is what I've been wanting to do. But there was, it got to a time where it's like, all right, I'm not going to be any good to the team if I'm not able to like burst the hole, even if I'm not getting the ball. So it would sub out and Matt Connors would come in. But during that game, it was really exciting. Once I knew I was close to 100 yards. I remember talking to Steven Sylvester. He was like the B-back GA coach. He actually played at Tech. He played linebacker. And he was like, yeah, Days, you're at like 97. I was like, all right, I need one more carry. I need one more carry. That's at that like the game was already solidified that we were going to win. I was like, I have to get 100. I have to. Like you can't get that close and not get
Right.
it. So that was a lot of fun. And my parents went to the game as well. They went to every home and away game, even the years that I wasn't really playing a lot. They never missed a game, home or away. Even with the BYU, they went out there every home and away game while I was in college. They never missed one. So that was something I think gratifying, for them to see how happy and excited I was, seeing their son excited to finally be able to, accomplish some of the things that he wanted to accomplish. So, that was a great time.
You were talking about how I just need one more yard. I just need one more yard. It reminded me, and I don't know if you've ever seen this movie, Synjyn. Obviously, I'm a big movie guy. But have you ever seen Facing the Giants?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep. When
so
he's
it kind of reminded me
carrying
of
the
that
guy on the
whole
back.
scene. Yeah, like I just
Yep.
one more yard. Yeah. Obviously, you guys go from that Pittsburgh beatdown where the Panthers were never the same after that, and then you go November 1st. You take on Virginia at Bobby Dodd. I always get nervous, Synjyn, anytime I see Virginia on the football schedule because it's like no matter what their record is, they're a scrappy unit and they're going to show
Mhm.
up. So I
Yep.
always get nervous about that. But apparently, I had no reason to be nervous back in 2014 because, again, 24 attempts, 147 yards. That's a 6.1 yard average, one touchdown, 17 receiving yards, and a touchdown. And we get the win. I say we like I'm on the team. 35-10 was the final score. Synjyn, what do you remember from that Virginia Cavaliers game? First time, I want to say, first time starting at the B-back spot in Bobby Dodd, right?
Yeah, that was the first. Yeah, that was the first B-back start at Bobby Dodd was that one. Trying to think things that stood out. I remember having one run where I broke out to, I guess, the home side, going down left. I thought I was going to score, but a safety came out of nowhere and like kind of did like a drop tackle on me, but I didn't care. I was hyped because I knew we were getting ready to score. And then the receiving touchdown, it was kind of like a B back, like leak out type thing. I remember catching it, going like it was like one of those moments where it's like I caught it. Nobody's like 20, 30 yards within me, and I essentially walk into the end zone. And then got to celebrate with my guy Aaron Joe. We were able to do our handshake and do that, and just to be able to pull another W in Bobby Dodd and be a major contributor to that was a good time.
And of course, we're going to keep things moving here with the next week because that's how this was for Synjyn, by the way, folks. If you don't remember, it was like, it took a while for him to get the ball, but once he did, it was like, get your popcorn ready. It's showtime for the next 7 weeks in a row. So, but the next week was November 8th at NC State. I'll give you the stat line here. 19 attempts, 157 yards. That's an 8.3 yard average. Shout out to the big fellas up front, by the way, because that
Yes.
basically means Synjyn ran for a first down before anybody thought to touch him. But anyway, one touchdown. Georgia Tech wins that game against NC State 56-23. You're at NC State. What do you remember about being at their place and running for 157 yards, Synjyn?
Um, I remember breaking, I think it was like a 40 or 50-yard run. And didn't look like I was moving fast, but I was not getting ready to get caught from behind. I remember doing that and then doing like our family's little celebration thing, like what we would do to like get each other's attention was that, and then we would point at each other I remember that, and then I remember before and after the game, good buddy of mine, Bradley Chubb. I'm sure people, have heard the name Chubb. So he actually went to Hillgrove High School. So when I say there's a lot of NFL guys that came from Hillgrove, I was the starting of that tradition. Bradley in the drafted first round. He's with the Dolphins now, close with him and his family. I remember just being able to see, Bradley before and after the game, and just be able to talk to him, and to see a familiar face was pretty cool for me. And parents went to that game too, so I was able to see them and talk to them after. So that's really the key memories I can think of from that game.
And of course, the next week you guys come back home. You got Clemson. And in that game against Clemson, you had 20 attempts for 89 yards, 4.5 yard average, and Georgia Tech wins that game 28-6. And I remember, and I might have this wrong, folks. So if I got this wrong, I'm gonna hope the Synjyn can correct me on this. But I believe that was the game that Deshaun Watson was playing for Clemson, and he got hurt. If I remember correctly, right?
Yeah, because he was already playing with a torn ACL, I think, if I remember. I think that was the injury. And then, he injured himself. And then I know our defense had two pick sixes, one by Chris Milton and one by PJ Davis. So shout out to defense for that game, because it was definitely tough sledding on the offensive side. I think Justin Thomas had a pretty big game in the A-backs. They kind of, even though 89 rush yards is nothing to be shy about, I think they shut me down, the B back position down, quite a bit that day.
I have to tell you, that's 89 more than my entire college career. So anyway, but as we move on here, we get to that big game, right? Georgia Tech, that is a big one. I have a personal story to tell on this one, but I'm going to let Synjyn go first. I'm going to give you the stat line. So we have got 16 attempts, 94 yards, a 5.9 yard average. Georgia Tech wins that game 30-24 in overtime. Obviously, the kick to get into overtime by three-time Super Bowl champion Harrison Butker. And then you got the pick six from DJ White. But Synjyn, I got to ask you your thoughts on that one, because that is a memorable one for sure, right?
Yeah, people ask me all the time what's my favorite game of my time at Tech, and people would assume the Orange Bowl, just because that was my best performance, and the stakes winning the Orange Bowl, all of that. I'm like, no, beating UGA in Athens senior year, nothing will ever top that, football wise at least. Because never beat UGA. So to be able to beat them my very last time ever having to face them again, was very memorable. And a lot of my coworkers are UGA fans and alum, and obviously go back and forth between Georgia Tech. That little fun rivalry. I'm like, hey, last time I played you, I won. So you can say what you want. So beating UGA in Athens was a great time, and I had a lot of friends that played at UGA, and funny enough, was going into that game. Was playing with two sprained ankles, two pretty bad Bradley's sprained ankles. So I think I didn't even play the fourth quarter. So if I would have played, then I would have had over 100 rushing yards. So it's like two games back to back. It's like I'm right on the cusp of 100, but not looking at stats at that time. Obviously, now looking back on it, yeah, you wish you could have done whatever. But Lasky was able to step in and lead us to a victory. I think he scored 3 touchdowns, if I remember correctly. And then Harrison with the kick. I didn't watch it when I was on the sideline. I'm not gonna lie. I had my head in my hands, and then you just hear this crowd essentially go silent in that huge stadium at Sanford Stadium. That's when I knew he made it, because if he would have missed it, it would have went crazy. So every time I see Harrison, I always say thank you for making that kick. He's like, Synjyn, you got to stop saying the same thing. I'm like, no, that meant a lot to me, man. To do that. And I guess one of the biggest memories that stands out for me. So it's actually, if people look it up, it's in the AJC. Me and my dad were reaching over the hedges, hugging each other. Um, and so we I have that picture still. Him and my mom were reaching over, getting ready to, embrace. And what they didn't get a picture of is obviously the tradition of taking the hedges from Georgia Tech's perspective, and then, from UGA, taking a piece of Grant Field. Obviously, can't do that now because we have turf. So thank you to the
Got him.
to the
Got
higher ups with that. But the hedges, my dad, he was like, Synjyn, look, he had a jacket on. He opened up his jacket.
him.
He has hedges stuck in them. So we still have hedges at the Days household. So shout out to UGA for that.
That's awesome. So I have to go back to what you said just a few minutes ago about how a lot of your colleagues are either Georgia fans or Georgia graduates, and I know because I saw it before we did the interview. There is a great photo of you. It's high def and everything of you with the hedges in your mouth.
Yep.
And so I have to ask you, I mean, Christmas time, you want to be a good fellow colleague, right? I would
Yep.
imagine that you get that framed and give it to the Georgia fans every year, just as a reminder, like Merry Christmas.
I
And
should. I should do that for sure. Yeah, that picture. Yeah, I mean, that's something that, things that are priceless, honestly. It's something you can't go back and buy. That's just something that's, it's a memory of a lifetime, honestly. So to be able to do that, in Athens, phenomenal, honestly, where, words really can't describe it.
okay, so here was my side of it. All right. So I had just met, my wife Cassandra like a year prior. Okay, so we were still in the dating, stages of our relationship. She was my fiance at the time, and she didn't really understand just how much this game meant to me. But I told her
Yeah,
whenever we first got together, I said to her, I said, Cassandra, I said, if because I didn't know how much of a football fan she was. I said, if you're only going to allow me to watch 2 games a year, I said the 2 games that I cannot miss, I said, is Georgia Tech and Detroit Lions Thanksgiving. I said those are the only 2 games. I don't care that much about the Bowl because we usually don't play. But also Georgia Tech, Detroit Lions Thanksgiving. So we don't live there anymore, but we're sitting in this trailer, right? And I don't have cable television. So I have to rely on the Georgia Tech app to listen to the game. So I can't even see what's going on. I got to listen to it, which I'm in radio now. So now I kind of have an appreciation for make sure that
oh
people,
yeah,
can really get the picture through your words. And I'm listening to Brandon Godden, and he's doing the broadcast. I forget who was with him. I think it was Sean Bedford, if I'm not mistaken. But it was Brandon Godden for sure. I know that. And I had a Georgia Tech beanie that I was wearing because I was like all decked out in my Georgia Tech stuff because why wouldn't you be, right?
of
So
course you have to.
so I hear that they're getting ready to do this kick. And I'm just like, oh no, not again. Because like I'm thinking we're about to get our heart broke, right? Because I became
Yeah,
a Georgia Tech fan in 2003. So I hadn't really seen a whole lot of victories over Georgia during my time as a fan up to that point. And so I pull the beanie over my face whenever he says they're getting ready to kick it, right? And my
yeah,
wife's sitting on the couch. I'm literally sitting in the middle of my living room, like crisscross applesauce, with my beanie pulled over my head, going, Lord, please, just let him hit this kick. Because they were talking about it as if Harrison hadn't really attempted anything that long throughout the season. So they were like, we
yeah, of
don't know if he's got that leg to be able to do this, which nowadays he's a 3-time Super Bowl champion. People would be like, well, yeah, he's going to hit that. But at the time,
course.
they were talking about it like he might not get it. So I got my beanie over my head. I hear, the kick go, right? and I hear Brandon Godden scream, he got it, he got it. And I go running down my house. All right. The single wide, I go running down my house, screaming my head off. My wife's screaming and everything. And then I'm like, okay, wait, this isn't the game. Now we got overtime.
Overtime.
So I remember when we drove down the field and we didn't I don't believe we ended up getting a touchdown on that, or there was something that happened, right? So Georgia gets an opportunity with it. And I'm like, oh no, here we go. And then DJ White picked it. And I believe it was Keshawn Freeman who got in the way of it. And then DJ White ended up picking it off. And so I experienced all of this via the Georgia Tech app on the radio side of things. I couldn't actually see it until like a week later. But I remember that game being huge in my household. And it's funny, every time, and I'm not a huge superstitious person, but every time Cassandra and I listen to the Georgia Tech game on the radio, they win. But every time we watch it on TV, we end up on the losing end of that. So maybe I might have to test that theory out this next season. But I will
for sure
be a huge fan of that app because, again, you guys are in Athens, Georgia at the time. I'm all the way up here 5 minutes from Canada, freaking out. And I'm sure my neighbors are like, what's going on in that house? And it's like, it's a Tech victory. That's what's going on in this house. But I thought you would appreciate that.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So obviously, you guys, get an opportunity to go play in the ACC championship game. Unfortunately, we didn't end up winning that game, but you still had a great game on a personal level. 19 carries for 67 yards, 3.5-yard average, and 3 touchdowns. What do you remember about that game, Synjyn?
I remember Jameis Winston essentially playing his best game that he played that year. Was against us, like no interceptions, pretty much a perfect game. And we were right there with them. We just needed them to make one mistake, and we would have won. And possible berth to the college football playoffs, possibly, because that was the first year that it came out. So that was pretty exciting. And I remember being interviewed after the game. They're like, yeah, since you had your best, most touchdowns you ever scored, how do you feel? I'm like, we lost. I don't care about that. Like, it was literally like the Marshawn Lynch, I'm just here so I don't get fined. That was completely my attitude. It was no personality, no, thankfulness or anything like that. At that point, I didn't care about me personally. I mean, we made it to ACC championship game, but if I would have had 1 carry for 1 yard and we won, I would have been happy. The fact that we would have won ACC championship would have been, phenomenal, especially senior year. So unfortunately, that was my experience with the ACC championship there.
Now, Synjyn, as far as, after games are concerned, because I think some fans maybe don't understand how this process works. I know I don't necessarily know either. But after games, when they are trying to find people to interview, whether it be the Georgia Tech broadcast team or maybe some other team, what is that process like for you as an athlete? Like, do you kind of know that you're going to get called upon for that? Or is that like a coach's decision? How does that work usually?
Yeah, generally speaking, I mean, you kind of know as a player, like if you had a big game or if you were a key person or whatnot, you're going to get interviewed. And, since I was a starting running back, 3 touchdowns, I figured I was going to get interviewed. But usually what happens, you get into the locker room, coach talks with you, you say, a prayer at the end, and then the media guy kind of comes in, like part of the team comes in and say, hey, we need X, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, come see us after. Come see us now or after you shout. Generally speaking, we go right then and there. So they kind of let you know, media-wise, what you need to get done. What sucks sometimes, though, is, having to do that with, like, you're tired, but you still have, like, your pads on. And sometimes it's hard to get them off. So you have to do the interview with, like, your pads on or whatnot. But you pretty much know, they let you know that you have to do an interview.
And I think that's important for people to know because I know a lot of times, not so much with Georgia Tech, but I know with a lot of other, professional teams and college teams, sometimes players can get judged for what they say in a post-game interview. But as you just described, it's not like they have time to really, kind of go through their emotions, especially after a loss, So maybe, just maybe, as fans, maybe don't judge these players so harshly because they're getting called to do this like 5 minutes to 10 minutes after the game, right, Synjyn?
Right, I agree. I mean, we're all human at the end of the day, and it's how would you feel if you just lost a big game and somebody's sticking a mic in your face? You don't feel like talking to anybody. Your emotions are, on a roller coaster. So yeah, let's be less judgmental. With some players for sure.
And of course, we get to the final game of your Georgia Tech career as a running back. You go and take on Mississippi State. And I should say Georgia Tech goes to take on, but I know everybody else is like, that's the Synjyn game, which you did certainly have ownership of that game, my friend. You had 21 carries in that game for 171 yards. You were averaging 8 yards a carry, and you got 3 touchdowns. Georgia Tech won that game 49-34, but respectfully, I will say the score is not indicative of how that game really was because Mississippi State, for all intents and purposes, I mean, they had already gotten beat down by the time they started wanting to try to come back. So it really was a blowout that turned into, okay, we got some scoring happening later on so that it can look respectful. But really, Georgia Tech dominated in that game. And I'm just curious, first from a team perspective, was there something special about that night?
Yeah, I mean, it was we just knew they couldn't stop us, honestly, no matter what we did. Whether it was giving it to me or Lasky or, the A-backs, Tony, Deion Hill, Charles Perkins, Dennis Andrews, or Justin Thomas, quarterback, just keeping the ball and doing what he needs to do, or, you know, throwing it to, Darren Waller. There was it was really nothing they could do to stop us on offense. That's the one things with triple option is once we get going, you can't stop it. Unfortunately, there's sometimes if you do stop it, it's not much we're able to do. But that night in Miami, you couldn't do anything to stop it. It was literally whatever they would read, they picked wrong most of the time. So, Coach Johnson did a phenomenal job, doing that, and play calling and offensive line did amazing job blocking. It was literally everything that could go right did that night.
And as far as you're concerned, Synjyn, obviously this is one of the best games of your career. And it's one that I know when I first met you, I said, hey, how about that, that tightrope play? And you were like, Elijah, that's what everybody asked me about, which is why we waited till now. That way we can get that good viewership in. But
Yeah.
as far as that play is concerned, walk me through it from the start of the snap to when you get into that end zone. What happened in your view?
Yep. So it was just a designated give, to the B back, and got the ball and bounced it a little bit wide because I saw the linebacker kind of getting blocked down, and was able to bounce it outside. And then a safety came up and tried to tackle me, gave him a little 1-2 move, and made him miss. And down on the sideline, defender tried to just push me out. Didn't want to wrap up or anything, and just went down the sideline, stayed in bounds, and scored. So funny thing about that. So before the game, they tried to give us like these new like special cleats. They try to do for different games like gloves and kind of commemorative type things. And there were these navy blue Nike cleats, all navy blue, maybe like a little bit of silver. And I tried to wear them pregame, but they were hurting my feet. So I have flat feet. So like when it came to cleats, it was something that I just stuck with kind of the same thing. And I tried to tough through and wear them. I said, you know what, I'm just gonna go back to my all white cleats. So obviously the sideline's white, my cleats are white, so we'll never know if I stepped out of bounds or not.
Hey, I'm gonna go with the ruling on the field on that one, my friend. If you don't,
I
but
appreciate that.
I know that was obviously a huge game. I remember watching that with a big old smile on my face because one of the things, and I don't mean to sound like I'm putting down, Coach Johnson or the system or anything like that, okay? Because I'm not. But I do remember as a Georgia Tech fan during the Paul Johnson years, it was frustrating as a fan because we would get into bowl games and then it seemed like that extra time that teams would have to prepare for the triple option would sometimes work against us. And so I was looking at it going, oh man, okay, so we got this whole stretch of time where Mississippi State's going to have the tape, and what's going to happen with that. And I honestly thought it would be a lot closer of a game than it ended up being because for folks who don't remember, Mississippi State that year at one point was number one in the nation.
Yeah.
And you guys said, okay, that's fine. We're going to go ahead and drop, I believe it was 49 points on that. So, again, that's a memory that, I, as a fan, I'm always very appreciative for because, I honestly, I don't even remember the ACC championship game that much. And that's saying something because my father is a diehard Florida State fan.
Yeah.
So I know he remembers that, but I don't remember. For me, like in my brain, it goes beating Georgia, beating Mississippi State. That's how my brain operates. But obviously that was kind of the bow on what was a really great senior season for you, Synjyn. I mean, I got to imagine taking the pads off that night must have felt a little different than taking the pads off any other night, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, to know that was my last time suiting up as a yellow jacket. Definitely, uh, kind of bittersweet. Obviously excited that we won that bowl game. But kind of sad at the same time. Like, hey, it's my last time putting on the white and gold. As a player at least. But yeah, my family. So I'm obviously from Florida, so I had a lot of family at the game, and somehow, some way, I don't know how, at the end of the game when they have like the trophy presentation and all of that, they were on the field. Have no clue how that happened, who gave them sideline passes or anything. Have no clue how that happened. So that was pretty cool to be able to celebrate, the end of my career with obviously, the teammates that I came in with from 18 years old to like 22, 23. And then, my parents and family as well. So that was something that was definitely a big moment for me.
Before we get to your time with the Dallas Cowboys, I got to tell you another story, my friend, because I think this will put a smile on your face. So, I coached a semi-professional football team up here in Messina, New York, called the Seaway Valley Venom. They're no longer around, okay, but I coached them back in 2016. The Cliff Notes version of that team's history, the year prior, they had played 3 games in their inaugural season. They had to quit every game at halftime because they had too many injuries. So whenever I came in, I was just like, let's just finish a game. That would be nice.
Yeah.
And I was trying to, put realistic goals for the team. Well, in the league we played in up here in New York, all these other teams that we would play against had major metropolitan cities they could pull athletes from. Whereas where I am, it's basically a whole lot of country field for miles. Okay. So
Yeah.
there's players up here, but we were consistently outnumbered. The teams we were playing against had like 90 guys on it, and we had like 25. So just to kind of put that in perspective. So I knew I needed something that would give us an advantage that other teams wouldn't have. So what I decided to do is I decided to try to run the triple option. And a lot of the guys that I was coaching had no context of what that was because everybody wanted to be, running the shotgun or getting all the yardage and things like that. And I'm like, fellas, maybe at some point we'll get to that, but we need something where we can, have a tactical advantage on all these other teams. And
Yeah.
so we tried to run the triple option. And in order for me to get them to understand what we were trying to do, especially for the B backs, I would put on your highlight tape and I would say, this is Synjyn Days. I said,
Oh gosh.
watch this, watch what he's doing, and that's what we're going to do. So like we would run, we ended up running the triple option out of shotgun because we were trying, we didn't have a fantastic offensive line, so we wanted to give our quarterback a couple extra seconds. So we would run it out of shotgun, and then we would line up in the Maryland I, and we would run dive off of that. And so again, though, my B-backs, they knew you very, very well. And
I
so I
appreciate
just,
it.
I just wanted to let you know that because I thought you would get a kick out of that. That I was up here in Messina, New York, being like, watch his tape, and then my quarterbacks, I would say, watch Justin Thomas, watch Josh Nesbitt, watch Tevin Washington. So I was trying to get them to understand what was going on, and I will always remember the first game we played. The first play of the game, the other team thought they were going to beat us by like 80 or whatever, and our quarterback faked it and ended up running for like 20 yards. And, that was like the highlight of the game for us, but still we were able to pull a fast one on them that they weren't expecting. Because
Yeah.
what offense are they running right now? We haven't seen this since high school. And I'm like, yeah, it's a Georgia Tech offense. So, but I did have a play card, not as good as Coach Johnson.
I love that.
But Synjyn, obviously, you go from being a Georgia Tech Yellow Jacket, and then you get an opportunity after the draft to, go out and play a little bit for the Dallas Cowboys. What was that experience like for you? And just out of curiosity, obviously you said you had Barry Sanders, who you really looked up to. Did you have a favorite pro team prior to the Cowboys?
Yeah, that process was pretty cool. So my locker was right beside Tony Romo's. So that was pretty cool. Obviously, one of the great Dallas Cowboy quarterbacks. So just be able to have conversations with him about life. He was very humble guy. When you're at that level, you think some guys would be big headed, especially with all the attention that he got, and obviously the quarterback of America's team. You would think would be big headed or whatnot, but it wasn't like that at all. Um, Great time just to be able to say, yeah, I did, make it to NFL. I joke around with people that don't know my story. I say, yes, I was in the NFL, and the NFL stands for not for long. Um, so was able to leverage some of those relationships there to kind of with what I'm doing now, and doing some work with some NFL players as well in the financial industry. Um, but it was a great time, and just to be like the 1% of the 1%, was pretty cool to be able to say.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because Synjyn, I don't know very many players, and I say this with all respect. Okay, I don't know very many players that can legitimately go into an NFL team and show 7 games. You know what I mean? Because a lot of these other players are showing like 20 something games or whatever, but you did so much in that 7 games that it got you that respect where they said we want to take a chance on this guy.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that. So story with Coach Johnson at his like retirement dinner, I asked him, I said, what was the biggest, thing you could change like about my career or whatnot? He said, I wish we'd have moved you to be back sooner. And I said, yeah, same here, coach. But it's one of those things is, everything happens for a reason. And what happened with, my life now, sure.
Now, Synjyn, as we move on, past the Dallas Cowboy years, obviously you are somebody who is kind of a game changer when it comes to the financial world. And I'm saying that because that's what I read about you, is that you are somebody who is becoming a very big deal, a superstar, if you will, in the financial world. But I don't want to, say something incorrect as far as what you do. So what is it that you do in the financial world?
Yeah, so I'm a financial planner. So essentially working with individuals and businesses and business owners, helping them with retirement planning, if it's on the individual side, insurance, um, and then on the business side as well, looking at, key man, type things and trying to figure out business valuations and different things like that. So helping with the personal and business planning. So if anybody needs any advice or wants to work with somebody, definitely feel free to reach out to me, and we'll love to have a conversation and see if there's anything I can add value in.
I know one thing that you don't really know about me, Synjyn, is that there was a time in my life when I had first moved up here to New York where I didn't, I was kind of couch surfing. I didn't really have a place to go. I'm going to spare you the story as far as why that happened. But what was really interesting was one of the people that was very meaningful to me in my life was a gentleman by the name of Jerry Manor. And what Jerry Manor does is he actually works for our local credit union up here in Messina, New York, and he goes out to various groups and he teaches financial literacy. And one of the groups that he went and taught to was my group. Whenever I was on food stamps and cash assistance, trying to, get back on my feet, trying to have more stable ground.
Yeah.
And one thing that I read about you, as far as what you do with what you do in the financial world as a financial planner, is that you're very passionate about getting into various communities that maybe don't have, as much knowledge about finances and things like that. And I was just curious, as somebody who has seen the value of that on a personal level, what is that like for you, and what do you do to try to get back out into those communities that need more information?
Yeah, so I guess to give you a little story. So one of my first clients was an older couple. Didn't make really like a lot of money, but they were Georgia Tech fans, and they honestly took a chance on me. Obviously, I'm maybe 24, 25, somewhere around that age, and at that point they're probably early 60s, and so they don't have a lot saved or whatnot. But they were like, "Hey, Synjyn, we we need to figure out a plan. We trust you. We care about you. We know your character and how you care about people. So we want to work with you and develop a plan for them." And literally, the husband and the wife both started crying in that meeting once I delivered the plan. And at that point, I realized, all right, this is my calling. It's not just for me to, make a living for me and my family. It's really more of me helping people out at the end of the day. That's something that, whether it's like in the finance industry, whether it's, I need to pray, with somebody or pray for someone. If I need to go out and help at a football camp or anything like that, it's me trying to, leverage my relationships, my things that I, know about in my past, to try to help somebody at the end of the day. I mean, there's, my life hasn't always been, pretty. I've had rough times as well. And I've always had somebody that, would reach out to me. So it's, my duty to be able to reach back and to be able to help that next generation and be able to help as many people as I can.
I can certainly relate to that, Synjyn. And two things that I wanted to say here before we keep it moving, because I know we're running out of time, and I appreciate you giving as much time as you have. Just kind of my own personal thing, but it connects with what you just said. After I kind of got back on my feet, after I met my wife Cassandra, one of the things I always wanted to do was get into filmmaking. I either wanted to play football or get into filmmaking. And so when I tried to make my first film, Ballad of Billy Badass, which is kind of like a gangster film, like Goodfellas, that sort of deal. When
Mm-hmm.
I tried to make that movie, I tried 3 different times and it didn't work all 3 times. It would fail at different parts of the production or whatever, but it would fail. And so I remember after my wife and I had done a couple of like comic book events up here in upstate New York to raise money for charities, her and I were sitting there and I said, I really want to try. I want to prove to myself that I can finish what I started. And so in 2020, pandemic going on, it's crazy, right? I actually filmed that movie with, a crew of people around me, finally got the team right, and we were able to make the movie. But what was so interesting about it was I did this because I wanted to prove to myself that I could finish something.
Yeah.
But I was paying all the members of the crew out of my pocket. And what I noticed was how much it meant to them to be able to be creative and be able to get actually paid for it, because a lot of times in the independent film industry, they're like, here's a copy of the movie, or we're going to have a pizza party, and like that's the pay, right? So the fact that
Yeah.
we're actually getting paid money and getting to be creative really meant something to them. And I ended up finding what I consider my purpose, of not just making art, but creating those opportunities for folks who, maybe that's a passion of theirs that they end up developing, or it helps them along the way. So when you were saying that the couple was crying after you delivered the plan, and you kind of realized that was your calling, that kind of hit me a little differently, my friend. But I would imagine that, like you just said, with the couple crying and really feeling like the faith they put in you paid off.
Yeah.
I imagine that that's a big part of why you do what you do, right?
Yeah. It's definitely exciting to see, people that, I've met with people that were, just like we're dating, then they get engaged. And, through that process, the guy's talking to me, how to save for a ring, what can he afford? And, having those discussions that, he gets engaged, then, they're planning the wedding, they get married, and they have their kids, and then, one or two kids, and them coming into the office and seeing like their family grow from 4 or 5 years ago. And then just seeing like their plan, like, oh, look at this account, it keeps growing, and different things like that. Those are things that get me excited, seeing the progression, working with people, honestly.
And Synjyn, if folks want to get in touch with you, just so not everybody's hitting your DMs, is there like an official website they go to acquire about your services?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, you can email me. It's Synjyn Days at financialguide.com. If that's too hard to honestly find, I'm on, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. If you just send me a message, I'm pretty active on all of those sites. So, there's people that DM me like, hey, Synjyn, I know you do financial planning. Can we talk? And I'm like, sure. What's your number? And then we try to schedule some times. Out that way. So pretty easy to find. Not too many Synjyn days is out there. So I'm sure you'd be able to find, any of my socials as well with that.
And the last part of this puzzle here that I wanted to make sure we got in before we ended the episode is your relationship with Georgia Tech now. It's funny because you had said before, and you're somebody who kind of flipped the script on this, in my opinion. You said, listen, when you go to Georgia Tech, it's not a 4-year thing; it's a 40-year thing. But what's interesting about that is I find that a lot of people, they look at that 40 years as what can it do for me, and it seems like you're looking at it like, what can I do for the Institute? Because you're always out there doing stuff for Georgia Tech. So, what are some of the things that you're really passionate about as an alum that you get to be a part of now? And what's your relationship like with Georgia Tech?
Yeah, so it's kind of crazy. It's like last year, started getting into, I guess, the media side of things, doing things with 680 The Fan. Just because I knew Hometown, I knew, Joe Ham and some of the team down there, and they would obviously always see me, and they, knew me, obviously playing days and being at Tech and everything like that. And so every every home game I'm on for about an hour, hour and a half before the game, just talking, what I think the game's going to look like, what Tech needs to do, and kind of my, I guess, kind of research on that. So doing that, and then with some of the players, just letting them know that, hey, I'm a resource here for you. I might not know all the answers if you're looking for a job in a certain career, but I know I know a lot of people putting it that way, and I know they have their own resources. I know, Georgia Tech, I know the athletic department helps them out as well. But just being as another reaching hand, honestly, for them, like, hey, you might not want to necessarily go to them. I'm here. I can, shoot you their number or whatnot. Um, and then just trying to honestly, inspire that next generation, something that's huge to me because uh, uh, regardless if Tech's winning or not, I'm going to be an alum of Georgia Tech. I'm going to be a former player. So anything I can do to help out the institute, I'll always let people know I'm down. Whether it's something that I won't get compensated for in any way, it's just like, hey, I'm here. Use me as a resource, no matter what it is. Obviously, schedule and time allowing. That's kind of my philosophy, especially with Georgia Tech, something because they've, you know, given me this lifestyle. So it's probably nothing I can honestly do to repay that forward to Georgia Tech. So I try to just lend my time as much as I can.
And Synjyn, again, man, I just want to say thank you for not just this interview, but for taking the time to meet my family. I know that was a crazy night for me personally because I was not ready for all that action. But I'm glad that I
Yes.
was there. I'm glad that we got the win over Syracuse. But I just wanted to say thank you for again taking the time to meet my family, especially in a moment where I needed some positive memories. And I remember one of the things my wife said, and I'm going to try not to get emotional when I say this, but one of the things my wife said as far as why that process of events happened, she told me in the Baltimore airport, she said, why this is happening, right? I said, why is that? And she said, it's because your grandfather's up in heaven pulling strings. And I think she was right because she normally is right anyway. Uh, but
Yep.
uh, but yeah,
Smart man.
that was special. That was really special. Synjyn, before we let you go, man, anything else you want the Tech fans to know about what you're doing or how to get a hold of you or anything?
No, I think we got everything covered. I mean, I think if people want to reach out to me, they can find me on the socials. So Instagram and Twitter is at sdays10. Um, Facebook Synjyn Days, and then email address is synjyndays at Financial Guide. If anything you want to talk about, I'm here to be supporting as much as possible.
All right. Well, folks, that is Synjyn Days, and I just want to throw this shout out there again. I'm looking for more people to be able to do an interview like you just heard with Synjyn. So former Georgia Tech players, it doesn't have to just be football. If you have a passion for the Institute, like I do, and I hope you do if you played there, make sure you get a hold of me and we can set up a time. But again, I want to thank Synjyn for being our guest tonight. Remember, folks, to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this interview, and hopefully we'll be back fairly soon with another episode of The Institute. For Synjyn Days, I'm Elijah Winfrey. Hey, be good to yourself, be good to others in that order. We'll talk to y'all soon.